Hello, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint a Stargazer lily with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Stargazers are one of my favorite flowers, and I had so much fun painting this one. Let's go over colors and brushes. So not very many colors in this one, which is really helpful. We will be using primary red, cad yellow medium, hooker's green, Mars Black, and light blue permanent and titanium white. This is the Royal and Langnickel light blue permanent. I just happened to grab this one. It's pretty close to the Liquitex one. The Liquitex one might be just a tad bit darker. I could show you them side by side, but I used that one. If you are using the Liquitex Light Blue Permanent, just add a little bit more white into your background. By the way, this is the color we'll be using for the background, and that's how you get that really pretty baby blue background. So only 6 colors for this one. I'll be using 3 different brushes and 3/4 flat. This is a Princeton Velvet Touch brush. The number 12 bright brush, this is a Royal and Langnickel Majestic brush, and the number 4 round is a Princeton Velvet Touch brush. If you don't have to use those exact brushes, use whatever you have available. We are going to get started. There is a traceable template that you can use to print and transfer this to your canvas, or you can draw this with me. So drawing lilies, I found it helpful to kind of just look at the shape of the lily and draw each petal kind of as an individual petal. So I'm going to start with this front petal, and I'm using a pencil right in the center of the canvas, so right in the middle, and this first petal resembles a heart. So it's a heart, it's kind of elongated, it goes to the left. The end of that isn't pointed, but it's rounded on the end, and it's got 2 bumps that kind of resemble the top of a heart. So that's our starting petal. And we want to do a total of 6 petals. So each petal is going to look very unique, very individual. And so I'm going to do this one. This one is going to be a petal that's going to start behind this front one that we just did. This one's going to go up, and I want to replicate the twistiness on the ends of the petals because stargazers have this kind of ruffled edge and the points kind of twist downwards. So you just make your side line kind of twist downwards, and then you sketch the rest of the petal, and that just goes down. This third petal is going to start behind the one that I just painted. And these are big. These petals are huge. We want to use up all that canvas so we can paint a giant stargazer. So this petal is going to kind of be flat up here. I'm going to have this petal roll backwards, so this top part kind of goes flat and then it rolls backwards on the right. There's like a little point that dips down behind that petal, and then it's just going to look really odd for now. This petal is going to kind of go out, kind of curve. This one's going to resemble more of like a leaf shape, and we want to do that little curve on the bottom where it kind of twists down. Do like a little moon shape right here, and that just makes it look like we can see the under part of the petal. I'm doing a little line down the middle of these petals. The line doesn't have to go all the way across. Did a line starting on the bottom, except for that top petal, I kind of just started at the top. Let's do our next petal. So this one's going to be going behind this guy. This is going to be pretty similar to that petal on the right. That's just kind of like a leaf shape. Simple one that kind of goes down. And if you don't like the 3-dimensional overlapping or where you can see the under part of it, you can just simplify it to be a basic shape. Stargazers have 6 petals, so I'm going to do one squeezed in back here. This one's just going to be kind of a simple narrow petal, just a little elongated shape line down the middle. So we have 3 petals that are kind of in front, 3 in the back. These that I'm doing right here, these are leaves. Just kind of an added artistic thing, pop of green behind of our petals. If you don't want to do leaves back there, you don't have to. And then this is a stem, so I'm going to take this line and kind of go behind this bottom petal and kind of go all the way down. The line is kind of bent, and it's a narrow stem, so 2 kind of curved lines that go down, and we can add some more leaves. Lily leaves are kind of narrow and pointed. So I'm going to make this leaf look like it's bending, but if you want to simplify it, you don't have to bend your leaves. And then I'll do a few more narrow pointed leaves on the left side. You can also use this opportunity to draw more leaves if you want to fill up some of the blank areas of the canvas. Or we can add those later. We don't have to draw everything that we're going to paint. These are the stamen. So we have the line that's the filament and the little oval on top for the anther. They technically have 6, but you can draw less than that if you want to. So I did 4. We can always paint more if we want to. A lot of that's going to be covered up with our first layer of paint anyway, so I don't want to do too much pencil drawing in that area because I don't want it to smear. So I have my basic drawing all ready to go, and the first thing I'm going to do is paint the background, which is a super easy step. Get that background filled up. And this is a really pretty light blue textured background. You're welcome to change the color. I would recommend something that contrasts well with the dark pink color. So I'm taking my 3/4 flat, and this is light blue and titanium white. So we're going to load our brush in both of those colors. A little bit of water on the brush to start out with. Take my white and blue, but I'm going to kind of mix them, but not all the way, and start applying this. So I'll start in kind of this lower right corner where there's a lot of open space, and you want to go around your petals. So we're painting the negative space around everything that we just drew. So to get in there, you want to use the edge of your brush to really cut in and get as close as possible to that shape without smearing your pencil drawing and without getting blue over your lines. So you kind of go around the shape, and then you want to create some angled paint strokes, some textured and fun expressive paint strokes in the areas where there's a bunch of blank canvas. And that's going to just give interest in the background because it is a blank area. So when you're applying this, you're going in all different angles, all different directions. The messier, the better. So use the edge to go around your petal and just kind of flip-flop, scribble your brush. It gives you those short, choppy brush strokes with blue and white. Your white and blue blend very quickly, so you can just like add chunks of like darker blue. So when you load your brush, you can load your brush in just blue and then load your brush in maybe just white, and then add your brush strokes, but don't over blend them. And that gives you that multicolor look in the background. Some of these points on the edges of the petals, I'm just going to paint over them, and I can just, when I paint the petals in, I can define those again later. Take your time as you're filling this background up, and feel free to pause the video as needed. This is going to go a little bit faster, and also I'm going to go silent for a little bit as I finish this step. You can see how it's creating texture, and that is by taking different amounts of your color and not mixing them all the way, just kind of letting them blend on the canvas to create different variations of blue and white. I'm going back here with some white and just adding a few little chunks of white kind of all throughout. And that just adds some really pretty texture. You can do the same thing with just the blue without mixed with white, just a few short little angled strokes in there. And that makes that background very pretty and textured. For this next step, we're going to load our paint palette with the color Primary Red. Primary Red is a very important color for this. If you're not using Primary Red, I recommend a magenta, so like quinacridone magenta, or even an alizarin crimson or a dark pink, depending on what kind of paint you're using. Because if you're using a red that's more of like a warm red, it's not going to pull the pink colors that we need for our flower. It's going to make it look orange if you add when we add white to it. So this is the color Primary Red, and a number 4 round brush. I'll also be using the 12 bright because the petals are big and the round brush doesn't fill up the space as fast or as easier, but let's start with the round. And this first step is actually really easy. We're not mixing colors or blending. We're just painting our petal shapes a solid coat of this primary red color. I added a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm just going to take this and let's start with this bottom petal. So I'm just going to kind of maybe outline the shape that I drew. And then as I'm filling it in, I call these contouring brush strokes. They go in the direction of the shape that we're filling in. So we're outlining it. When you outline, you want to get close to the edge as possible. And also, stargazers have these kind of ruffled edges to their petals. So to create the ruffled edge, you'll want to make the edges of your petals kind of wavy. I'm using a 12 bright to fill in the bigger areas in the middle, so you can use that to fill it in faster. But then the round brush, we really can get in there and do the edge, but also the round brush is going to help us get those kind of wavy edges to the petal. So right here, kind of wiggle the brush to get that. I'm going back and forth between the little flat brush and the little round brush. You can do the same, or you might find that maybe just the flat brush works for you and you don't need the round brush. You can also kind of wiggle the edge with the flat brush to get that edging as well. And you don't have to follow your drawing exactly. You can make your petal bigger and overlap your background if needed. We can also repaint part of the background if there's leftover canvas. So I'm going to do this next petal. This one's coming up. Same color. We're not mixing anything. It's not any different. Outline the shape of your petal and then fill it in. So we can do more of that wavy edging, wiggling your brush. This petal has a little corner that curves down. We drew this, but I painted over it. So I'm going to take my round brush and that primary red and I'm going to repaint this. It's a little tiny point that curves backwards. My background's still a little wet. It's kind of pulling more of a purplish color, so I'll add a little bit more paint to my brush. But that part bends backwards. And when we add our lighter color to the petal, we can make it look more three-dimensional, like it's bent backwards. But for now, it's all the same color. Then I'm going to do my next petal, and this is the 12 Bright brush. So this one, easy petal. Outline the shape. Fill it in. So use more the edge of the brush for the edging, but then the bigger part, you can use the full width of the brush. So this curves. If I need to, I can switch to the round brush to fix that point a little bit more. And full width for the bigger part of the petal. Wiggle it to create the ruffled edging. And I'm just going to repeat this for each of the petals. I'm going to outline the petals, create the ruffled edging, fill them in solid with that primary red color. So this petal's a little tricky because it folds backwards. So I'm just going to do like a little point like this, and then this part kind of goes that way. This next petal down here, I'm actually going to make this petal a little bit bigger than what I drew it, which is fine. We're allowed to paint over parts of the background. Just make sure your background is dry if you have to do that. I'm going to use the round brush to kind of define the edges that I want for this petal and then fill it in. This petal is going to be super simple because it's not going to fold backwards. It's just going to be really pointed at the end. And then with the edging, I find it helpful if you water down the primer red just a little bit. It makes it more flowy. So I can go back and do more of the wavy edging. If any of the petals do overlap the background, you might notice some parts of it look a little darker because it overlapped the background, and that should be fine. It's not going to affect the final result of the painting if you paint over parts of the background. So all 6 petals of the flower are painted in, and we are going to let that layer dry before doing anything else. I'm going to clean off both of my brushes, and I'm going to load my paint palette with the color Hooker's Green Hue, and we're going to work on the stem and the leaves. Let's use the number 4 round brush for this. And I'm going to mix a little bit of red into my green. Just a little bit. Just grab a little bit on your brush and mix it in on the side. That's going to make your green kind of a more natural, dark looking green. And it's super fun to just mix the opposite color into the color that you're using. So the opposite of green is red. And that's going to tone it, make it more of like a warm green color. And it's really pretty to work with. I'm going to take this and paint the stem. This is kind of the same concept of painting a first layer. We're not mixing or blending colors right now. We're just defining our shape and painting that shape in. I'm going to loosen this a little bit with water just because we have some smaller areas to paint. I'm going to do the leaf next. So all of the leaves get painted in this dark green color. This part of the leaf looks like it's kind of folded over, so I painted that so that top part is kind of overlapping right here. So we have this kind of saucer shape and it overlaps the part of the leaf that it's bending at. And then these leaves are just flat and narrow, pointed edge. So you just outline your shape and fill it in solid. By now, our first layer for the petals should be dry or mostly dry. You don't want to do this step if it's super wet still. So I'm going to rinse off my 4 round and we're going to add our next layer. And this is going to be a lighter color and we're going to start creating the border of the petals because Stargazer lilies have this light color border along the edges of the petals. And we're not going to do our brightest color next. We're going to do kind of our medium in between color for this. So I'm going to take primary red and titanium white, add maybe about 3 parts red to 1 part white. It should be lighter than our first shade, but not really bright pure white yet. And I'm going to take the 4 round brush in this color and I'm going to start painting a border, the edge, inner edge of this petal. I'm going to start on the bottom petal. And then you want to outline maybe a 1/4 inch of space along the inner part of the petal. So just kind of estimate that if you're working on a different size canvas. Or outline the entire thing. This is going to make the edging look lighter. You want to make sure you're doing the ruffled edging too. And then I'm going to do this thing, I call it dry brushing, glazing. And I'm just taking my brush and just kind of lightly brushing next to that outline with the intent of it not being solid, but just kind of see-through so that it kind of blends in with the rest of the dark. So the middle part of that petal really needs to remain dark. I'm going to repeat this again for each of the petals. So take your light color, load that onto the brush. So we have a generous amount of paint on the paintbrush, and this is that number 4 brown brush, by the way. So take this, outline, do your wavy, ruffled edging. This part, I'm going to leave the point of that dark because it folds. So go on the edges, wiggle the brush to create that edging, and then dry brush. That means I'm not pressing hard, I'm not applying thick layers of paint right there. I'm just gently glazing my brush over to add a very light layer while leaving the center part of the petal dark. Let's do it again. Create the border on here. I'm twisting my brush here because I know I'm going to take this and it's going to get very thin, so I want some paint right on the end of the tip of the brush. It's going to go here, but I'm going to leave that point dark because that's where it folds over or folds under. I'm going to take this, go on the edging, wiggle the brush on the edging, and then very lightly do your dry brush kind of in the inner part, but don't cover all of it and leave the middle part dark. So your lily is starting to have some dimension in it by adding this lighter color layer. Adding a little bit more white to my color here. And twisting the brush, let's do our next petal. So this one should be easy. This one is a kind of a front petal, so I want to start it so it's overlapping. Wiggle the brush along the edges to create the border. Do this, but leave the tip of it dark. And because this is a front petal, I'm going to take this border all the way down and then lightly brush your dry brush paint strokes on the side of that border, but leave the middle part dark. So let's do the next petal. Get your brush prepared, twist it, get that paint right on the end of the bristles, a little bit of water if needed. And then this is going to start behind that petal. So I'm going to take this border over here. This part gets a little bit tricky because of how it folds. I'm going to take the border all the way here. Maybe outline part of that curve, but right here, this part, that's dark because that's folded. So I'm going to paint that inner part dark and then take white and outline this little loop right here. Take white, outline this outer part, and then go back to my other color that I'm using for the border and go back and finish the border. So I used white along the edge of the part that folds just to kind of brighten that part up. And then do some dry brushing right here. The dry brushing kind of goes that way because of how the petal bends. So it kind of curves on the end of that petal. And then we have one more petal to do the border. So take your light color that you've been working with and outline the edge. If you need to go outside of the lines when you're outlining, you can. But I'm doing it mostly on the inside of the petal. And this one doesn't bend backwards, it just goes to a point. So I just did the outline on the entire shape of the petal and then do your little bit of dry brushing. Next, we're actually going to add some dark pink to this. We already did a dark layer, but we're going to do another layer that's even darker, and we're only going to put that in the middle of our lily. So I'm going to take my primary red and add some green to it, just like what we did with the leaves, but this time a lot more of that red because we don't want it to turn green. We want it to turn into a dark red. So if you add about 2 parts red to 1 part green, you're going to get this dark red color. We're going to take this dark red color and do this on the middle part or the top. Yeah, this is the top part of this petal, but it's the middle part of the flower. And we're brushing this down kind of in curved direction in the shape of the petal so that the base of your petal turns really dark. I'm loading more of the red on my palette so I can mix more of this darker color. You just want to make sure you don't do too much green. You don't want to do equal parts. You just want to make sure there's a little bit more red than green when you mix it. So I'm going to do this petal. So you're taking this and you're dragging it outwards from the center. And just kind of releasing the pressure of the brush. You don't want this to go all the way across the petal, just on the bottom part of it. And then back here, same thing. That's going to create the illusion that there's shadow behind that petal because that petal is going behind some of those front petals or 2 of those front petals. I'm going to twist my brush and actually I'm going to take this and do a line. That line is done on purpose. That's a dark line that goes down the middle. Each of the petals are going to get this. So just a thin dark line that goes down the middle. It has to curve and go in the direction of that shape. So this one doesn't really curve because the petal is kind of going straight. This one curves. So you do your little light or your dark lines, and then this one shadowy at the bottom, and a line that kind of goes across. I'm going to go with another layer here. This time I added just a tad more green into that, darkened it just a little slightly, and I added another layer right in the middle part of that lily. So I'm going over what I had just painted with this second layer with the intent of it being just a tad bit darker right in the middle. Now we are going to add another lighter layer, but this time it's going to be many tints lighter than what we just did. So I'm going to take that light pink color that we were working with for the border, add white to it so it becomes lighter, not pure white yet, but lighter. And I'm going to go and add this next layer to the edge of my petal. I'm not covering up all of it. In fact, it's kind of thinner. It's not like a 1/4 inch wide like we did earlier. It's thinner. I can even go outside the lines if I need to. It's creating that light colored border that Stargazer lilies have and still do the ruffled edging. If you want, you can even kind of dry brush some of that next to it. You're going to do that to each of the petals. When you get down to this little bend part right here, you just want to outline this part, but not the dark pointed part because that's folded under. And a little bit of dry brushing, just like what we did when we did that other light layer right here. Do your wavy edging right here. Go down and don't outline the pointed part. Wavy edging, a little bit of dry brushing. We haven't used pure white yet because we are actually going to go back when this dries and add a pure white little thin edging to it, and that's really going to brighten things up. Outlining this border. And then a little bit of dry brushing right here where it kind of curves. Gives it that 3-dimensional look when we do that. You're going to notice as we're doing each of these layers, when it dries, your layers are darkening because paint will darken when it dries. I'm going to go in here, do some dark right here. I want all of that to be dark so we don't really see the pointed edge. It just folds backwards. Then go back with my lighter color and re-outline the edging. So that's the dark part is the under part where it folds backwards. Okay, so we're going to do this petal next. So get your lighter color. This part gets outlined. The pointed part stays dark. And we're just taking this and doing your kind of wavy edging. And then go all the way to the bottom part of the petal. A little bit of water helps kind of make the paint flow better. Little tiny brush strokes. You want to work very slowly as you're doing this. And then we'll take this outline and go on this side. Go all the way down. Some dry brushing on the inside, but remember we want to keep the middle part of our petals nice and dark. And then petal number 6, same thing, your lighter color. Wiggly brush stroke along the edges. If you need to go outside the lines, that's okay. And you don't have to wait for this to dry for this step. I'm going to take some titanium white. So I'm going to get some pure white on my palette, and I'm going to do some outlining with just titanium white. I'm not going to rinse my brush for this. If you want to, you can rinse a brush, but I didn't think it was necessary because this is still going to show up really bright just because I'm loading my brush in only white. So along the edges, and see how I'm not outlining everything. This is loose outlining. It just means I'm loosely outlining. And it's not a continuous line. It's kind of broken. I'm picking spots to outline. And that's really helping to make the edges of those petals nice and bright. I'll just outline that part for fun. So you want to do this to each of the petals, very thin, loose outline along the edges. And we're just using the titanium white. This is our brightest layer. And in fact, when this dries, we can even go back and add another layer with the white, and it'll brighten it even more. Next, we are going to do our next layer for the leaves. We've spent a lot of time detailing these petals. We're going to let these petals dry before we do the little dotted markings and the little filaments on the center. But let's not forget about the leaves. And I'm going to mix a lighter yellow-green color. Let's take our yellow. This is Cad Yellow Medium, so let's take green, yellow, and white and mix those 3 colors together, about equal parts, green, yellow, and white. If you want it to be more yellow, you can add more yellow to it. Twist your brush And let's add our next layer to the leaves. So this leaf is a bending leaf, and I'm going to make this top part my lighter color. In fact, I'm going to get more white on this one. So this top part is lighter, and then eventually we'll make the under part of that darker. And for the other leaves, they're not really bending, they're just there, flat. And sometimes I like to just choose one side and do light green layer. It's almost like I'm glazing this over. So I'm very lightly brushing this light green over, but there's a lot of that darker green still showing through. And in fact, if I want to, I can grab darker green on my brush and kind of blend that. I'm not going into a lot of detail with these leaves. It's really pretty to add this layer of color. However, we don't have to make them look super realistic. And if you're doing leaves up here, you can paint them the same way. The bottom part of those leaves would be more dark and shadowy, and we can add darker shadow layers later. The stem, kind of the same thing, just lightly brush over that lighter green, and you can still have one side of that stem be dark, one side be light. Okay, next we are going to do the little dotted markings on our Stargazer, and ideally everything should be dry before doing this. Let's take our round brush and we're gonna make that dark pink again, but let's try to make it a little bit darker. So let's take that dark green that we used early, or that dark pink, the dark red, it's primary red, but it looks pink. Add a little more green into it, just makes it a little bit darker so that it shows up. So it should show up when we're doing this. So we're gonna take that and do little markings. Let's start on this front petal to kind of make the example one. And they go kind of opposite. So imagine that the line that splits down the middle, the markings kind of go opposite directions and angles on opposite sides of that line. You want to do this for each of the petals. And the little markings, they're mostly towards the bottom, so there's not any, I'm only filling up maybe the bottom half of each of the petals. They're like little dash marks. If your little markings that you're making, if you're having a hard time seeing them, you can add like a little bit more green to the color to darken it some more, or even add a little bit of black to it. In fact, we will be using black to add a few super dark dots, and that's going to create some pretty contrast too when we use the black. So I'm going to go ahead and load my paint palette with some Mars Black. This is the first time this color is showing up in this painting. And we don't need to rinse the brush, but we only need just a teeny tiny bit of black on the end of the bristles. And we're going to go in there and do more. These are smaller dots, and they're only towards the bottom. They don't go very far like the other ones did. We want to wait for everything to dry before doing the next step. We're going to paint the little lines and ovals in the middle of the lily, which are the stamens. So there's the line, which is the filament, and the little oval on top, which is the anther. And let's make a light green color. So you want to do the same kind of light green color that you did for the leaves, but make it just a little bit lighter than that because we're going to be painting those over kind of the middle part of the lily. We want it to be light so it shows up against the dark part of it. And we're using the number 4 round brush. So let's start in the very center part and do our first little line. So I'm starting at the top and dragging down, and I'm stopping right in the middle. Do another one. So I'm making it overlap kind of the darker part so we can see it. So there's 4, technically there should be 6, but if we do 5, that's fine. The other one could be hiding. I'm going to do another layer just because it was kind of a thinned down version, so it didn't show up super light. And if we need to, we can add a darker layer to this kind of on the bottom for shadowing. I'm going to actually add a little bit of green in the center of the petal too. You don't have to do this if you don't want to kind of mess with the way the Stargazer lily looks and you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But I'm going to take this green and a very, very thin line right down the middle. Remember we did that dark line earlier? I'm lightly taking that green over that line down the middle of each of the petals. Some of these are just kind of disguised because of the other lines that we just did. It adds a really pretty pop of color on the petal. Some Stargazer lilies do have this pop of bright green right in the middle part of the flower on the base of the petals, so that's what I'm trying to replicate, and it just adds a really pretty pop of color. We are next going to mix a dark orange color on our palette, and that's going to be used for the little oval shapes that are on top of those lines that we did. So these are going to be the anthers that are going to be attached to the filaments. And let's make this orange by using the primary red and yellow. So red and yellow, cad yellow. Mix those 2 colors together. It's going to make, so if you do equal parts, it's going to make a dark orange color. And then add a little bit of black, just a dot of black in there. And it's going to darken your orange and it's going to look like a kind of a brownish orange color. On the end of the green lines that we did, you're going to paint a little oval using that color. So just like that. I'm going to go a tad bit darker just because I want those to stand out better. So they are really dark. So do that on each of your little lines. Then I'm going to get titanium white and highlight this. So we did dark. I'm just going to take my white without rinsing the brush. Just do a little bit on the top of each of those. And it'll blend with that darker color below it, but also get that to kind of stand out better. Next, I'm going to go back with some more of this green color, but lighten it with more white and more yellow. And I want to brighten up those lines. So I'm going to take this and just go over those green lines with the light, it's like a light yellow green color. That is really going to brighten those up. I'm going to grab dark green now. I want to make the base of those lines darker, but leave the top parts of those lines brighter. So just a little bit of dark green at the bottom, and then I'm going to do a little bit of black at the bottom. So that's going to make it extra dark. So just a teeny tiny dot of black on the brush and just going back over at the very bottom part of those little lines, and that's going to darken them even more. We are almost done with our lily, but I'm going to do some final touch-ups that you might decide maybe you don't want to do these final touch-ups, but I am going to add another layer of white along the edging. Now that things have dried, things darken, adding another layer of white is only going to brighten it even more. So I'm going to take cleaned off number 4 round brush and just titanium white, nothing else. And I'm just going to go along and do that loose outlining again. So we don't have to outline everything unless you want to. And just go along the edges, and this is really going to brighten up the edges of our lily. And the last final detail is going to include adding some shadowing to the leaves. So we're going to give the leaves a little bit more attention. So I'm going to take green and a little bit of black to make a very, very dark green. And then this part right here where the leaf folds over, just added a little bit of that dark green on the under part of that leaf, a little bit at the bottom of the leaf, and then wherever there would be some shadowy parts of the leaf, like for example where it's over or the petals overlapping it, so this part might be a little bit shadowy where the leaf is, and this part as well, adding just dark layer, but I'm not painting over the entire leaf. I'm just kind of dragging my brush strokes upwards, and then right here we would have a little bit of shadowing. And this is the conclusion of how to paint a Stargazer lily. I'm going to sign my name with a paint pen in the lower right part. So sign your name, show it off. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.